Hey everyone, welcome to iCommunicate. If you've ever struggled with holding people accountable, coaching, and difficult conversations, you're in the right place. iCommunicate provides fresh perspectives and actionable insights to coach leaders, teams, and individuals. Welcome to iCommunicate. I am your host, Mark Altman, CEO and founder of MindsetGo. And I got to tell you, this podcast is ending a long hiatus of no podcast, which I have missed tremendously. And before I introduce my immortal producer over here, I just want to say that, we're a company that often talks about mindset. And I have been thinking about today, preparing for this podcast, that I'm a pretty lucky person. This is something that's a passion for me. And whether it's doing a podcast, whether it's having the opportunity to support individuals through coaching or facilitating or training on a daily basis, it's a gift for me. So I just wanted to say I'm feeling really lucky and fortunate as we resume our podcast of iCommunicate. And with that said, I'd like to introduce our immortal producer, Mike Kamali. Mike, happy to have you with me, man.
I'm overjoyed to be here, Mark. I look forward to working with you on this podcast every chance we get. And I'm super amped that we're getting to start off on the right foot here.
Awesome. So, what's really important to me when we do these podcasts is, and I often use the word when we work with clients, intentional. And intentional to me means let's make it meaningful. Like, we're not doing this just to do it. And a podcast to me, this podcast, iCommunicate, when you listen to this, we should be adding value to your life, to your personal and professional life, to allow you to support your team members better, for leadership. And the iCommunicate podcast has always been about communication. It's about coaching. It's about being a better leader. It's about building stronger relationships. And we will talk during the podcast every week when we do podcasts. We'll talk about parenting examples. And Mike and I are big sports fans, so we'll bring in sports to the mix. Right, Mike?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go Celtics. Come on now. We got to root for the Boston teams.
Love it. And so we want to be thought-provoking. When you listen to this podcast, we want you to walk away, and we want to accomplish 3 goals every podcast. And I want to be really clear about this. 1, when you listen to these podcasts, number 1, your head should be spinning in a good way. When this podcast is over, you should be thinking about things differently than you have before. 2, you should have increased self-awareness of your thought and behavior patterns as we walk through some of these topics. And 3, you will always have tangible tools and strategies to apply, because this podcast is about solving problems at its core. So with that said, our topic today is coaching. And why I picked this topic, beyond the fact that I'm passionate about it and beyond the fact that we do it on a daily basis, is because in 12 years that I've been doing this, and this is not an exaggeration, I have encountered maybe, of the thousands of leaders I've interacted with, I'm going to say maybe 5% of those leaders actually understand what coaching is. Maybe a percentage of those actually do it. And maybe a percentage of those actually do it well. And so the thing about coaching is, right, it's an art form. And as we get into this show today, I'm just going to set the table by letting people know coaching is not giving advice. Coaching is not solving a problem. Those things are giving advice and solving a problem. Coaching is actually guiding someone to the realization of their blind spots, motivating and inspiring them to do better. And we're going to get more into this in the show, but I just want to set that table early. It is not giving advice or solving problems. Now, I want you to picture a scenario as we get into this podcast today. Think about someone in your life right now, okay? And this person has a behavioral tendency that maybe you don't love. Maybe they procrastinate. Maybe they can't manage their emotions. Maybe they don't follow through consistently. And so let's say you had to coach that person. Okay, now think about this for a second. This is a person that you have to coach. How long do you think this person has had those habits, those behavioral tendencies? Mike, we talked earlier today. What was the one you share with the audience? What was the one you talked about?
Yeah. So one of the habits that I've been constantly working on has been note taking and my ability to be clear and accurate with all of my dates and goals, really. So, that's something that it doesn't happen overnight. And I've been working on it for years. It's still not there.
And Mike, just so our audience knows, you're how old?
I am currently 25.
25. He's been working on it for years and he's 25, which is a compliment. That's not great. So just think about it. This is a young guy, a young, talented professional who has the self-awareness to know that he has an area of growth to work on. He has been actually working on it. We won't put him on the spot yet to learn how he's actually been working on it, but he has been working on it. So the question is, if you're going to coach someone like Mike, what does that even mean? Are you going to have a 30-minute conversation with Mike who has this challenge, and at the end of the 30 minutes, Mike's problem is solved? Like Mike's now taking notes brilliantly for good. Mike always sets clear goals and clear expectations in 30 minutes. I mean, the joke I always make to people is, have you ever met anybody that started procrastinating yesterday? Have you ever met anybody that started struggling to manage their emotions yesterday? There is scientific data out there that says by the time you're 35 years old, 93% of your life habits are formed. At 35, 93% of your habits. That feels like an uphill battle to coach someone with behavioral tendencies. So let's be clear. Coaching is a long-term solution. Solving problems is an immediate fix, short-term solution. I do a lot of work with companies around courageous conversations. And one of the questions I ask leaders when we do these programs is I ask the group, I say, what is the most ill-conceived, ineffective, courageous conversation in the history of man and womankind? And no one ever gets it. And you know what the answer is? The sex talk with kids. And why? Because think of the premise of the sex talk. One conversation, right? Neither side wants to have it or is looking forward to it. And then the parent or parents have the conversation. And after a 30 to 45 minute discussion, the parent walks away and goes, whew, glad that's over. Never have to talk about that again. Like, that doesn't seem like a logical outcome for a difficult conversation to close the channels of communication. So you understand that with coaching, it's a long-term solution, and it's about guiding people and inspiring people and having them recognize where their blind spots are. Now, why does this matter, right? Because you might be saying, well, I know why it matters, Mark. Like, of course, everybody needs a coach, theoretically. Maybe. And think about the challenges that could get in the way, right, of coaching. Because if you're a good coach, what you're actually doing is you're helping people increase their self-awareness. You could be helping people increase their confidence, shift mindset. Maybe someone who has a fixed mindset. If you're unsure what a fixed mindset is, it's a rigid emotional stance where you're resigned to a fate. So there could be a mindset challenge. People could have thought patterns, right, or belief systems that are interfering with their progress and success in their job or in their life. We're trying to get people to recognize what motivates them, how to leverage their strengths. And the single biggest thing, and this is your first clear takeaway on the show, here's the hint, right? Your single biggest, most important first thing you do when you coach someone is you have to understand what's in the way. What are the barriers? What are the fears? So Mike, be a guinea pig for me right here. So you talked to our listeners and you said, yeah, let's just do the note-taking piece for the moment, okay? So this is not about Mike caring. Mike wants to be a good note taker. Mike is passionate. So we can immediately, and I know Mike, so that's why I'm saying that. So we can immediately dismiss motivation or passion around being a good note taker, or even standards, right? So, Mike, what's in the way? Let's everybody see this. So what do you think's in the way of you becoming a good note taker?
Yeah, I think it's been an issue with habits that I built over a long period of time. It started back when I was in grade school, really. I always have had an issue with showing my work, especially in math problems and things like that. And to me, notes always kind of followed that same pattern where I will write down the most important thing, but I miss the context around it, which
Okay.
is a really big part about note taking that, it really affects my work as a result.
Okay, so let's stop right there. So don't even get me on my pedestal about how the public school education system is failing the world. So I won't even get that. That's no disrespect to any teachers, right? It's just the system, right? And so, Mike, when you were in school, at any level of school, middle school, high school, college, whatever, did anybody ever teach you how to effectively note take?
Oh, goodness, no.
Never.
No.
So when we talk about barrier or fear in the way, this is a big moment, everybody, okay? Mike never was given a template. Okay. Now think about what a template actually means. All right. If I'm coaching someone, okay, who struggles with authority, can be very reactive or hostile with authority, how do we get there? Like, how do you just wake up one day and become struggle and hostile with authority? Well, you know what? One of the reasons it could be you didn't have a father figure. One of the reasons could be you've had influencers in your life, adults, that were really mean and reactive to you. So you don't really have a good sense or vibe about authority. Those are what I mean by fears and barriers. We have life templates, right? A life template is, and I have someone that works for me, and she's amazing. And I'm not going to say her name because it's not my place to say her name, but I have someone that works for me who's amazing. She worked for a company before she came to MindsetGo for 21 years. Okay. We were lucky enough to find her when she left that company. Okay. So when she came to the company, right, as you would imagine at MindsetGo, we're all about feedback. We're all about empowering our employees to speak their truth and give us feedback so we can be better at what we do. Okay. So our first couple of months on the job, all the time I said, hey, what's your opinion? How do you think we should do this? What's better? She never spoke up. So I'm frustrated because I've always impressed that. I've tried to build the culture at MindsetGo around that. And so finally, after a few months, I'm like, hey, what's in the way here? Like, what's the fear? What's the barrier? Talk to me. Like, what's going on? And this is what she said to me. She goes, Mark, I worked for my previous company for 21 years. Not once did my boss ever ask for my opinion. Not once was it solicited to say, what do you think? How do we attack this? And then after a 21-year behavior pattern of never being asked, you think I'm going to come in the first couple of months and be able to shift that pattern on a dime? That's not really realistic. And she's right. 21 years of behavior pattern. So when we talk about barriers and fears in the way, Mike, one of the things we've just learned is he didn't have a template. No one ever said, this is how you take good notes. Huge fail in the public education system. Now, Mike, let me ask you, and I'm going to give you multiple choice. When we're talking about barriers and the fears in the way, I'm going to give you multiple choice. Could these be the case? Maybe you haven't developed the skill to be a great note taker. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we have template, no template. We have skill. Are you confident as a note taker?
No, not fully.
Okay.
Not fully.
So confidence could be an issue. Do you have enough knowledge to really excel at taking notes?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay, so when we look at barriers, because I really want everybody to get this, barriers can range from confidence, knowledge, skills, past experience, support and follow through to be good at it. Could be trust, could be templates. These are all barriers. And I want to make something very clear to the audience. If you're asking someone to do something that they're not currently doing at all, not currently doing consistently, or not currently doing well, you're asking them to change. Change, a word that people typically detest. Change. And if you're asking people to change, I don't know about you, but I don't see too many people change on a dime. Like, it takes time, it takes mindset, it takes effort, it takes intentionality, it takes confidence. So I don't care who you're coaching, what you're coaching, right? How do you identify that fear and barrier in the way? And it's got to start there. One of my favorite stories to tell about this is the baseball player who plays shortstop, the middle school kid, boy or girl who plays shortstop, 8th grade, okay? So this kid's learning how to play shortstop. And every time the coach hits the kid the ball, it rolls through his or her legs. So I've coached baseball and basketball for 25 years. So in my experience, when a ball rolls through a kid's legs at shortstop, the coach yells, "Hey, get down on the ball." And no kidding. Like, the kid knew they were supposed to get down on the ball, right? So that's not coaching. Repeating yourself and telling a person, get down on the ball. You didn't coach them. He's a coach, but that's not coaching. Saying get down on the ball, especially when the shortstop's been told that probably since they were in 3rd grade. So they already knew that. They haven't developed the habit. So here is what fears and barriers look like. So meanwhile, in this mythical scenario, the coach keeps yelling, get down on the ball. So if I was standing next to the shortstop, this is what I would coach the shortstop to say back to the coach. I would have the shortstop say, hey, coach, can I just ask you, do you have any other tools in your toolbox? Or is the only tool you have to coach just to repeat yourself over and over until I actually do it? And so here's the rub. The inning's over. The shortstop comes in to talk to the coach, and the coach looks at the shortstop and says, hey, can I just ask you? I mean, I feel like we've run through this 100 times in practice. I've told you over and over, what's going on? Like, why aren't you doing this? Oh, you know what it is, coach? You never asked me. I'm afraid of the ball. Oh, I guess that's the barrier in the way. So I hope everybody follows that story, because this fear barrier thing, I don't care how well you know how to coach, the absolute starting point is what's the fear, what's the barrier. Now, we have a saying at MindsetGo, and that it's called a success template. And a success template is a clear expectation. A success template is how to hold someone responsible or accountable. A success template is something that is one of the most powerful ways to help human beings sustain confidence and motivation. So I'm going to model this for you right now. At its core, a success template is, what would you see and hear someone do where if you watched them do it, you would know they were having success and at bare minimum, making progress. So what would that look like? So I want to walk you through a coaching success template. So for instance, if you're coaching and you're listening to this podcast, you're going, geez, Mike, I'm not even sure if I am a good coach. How would I know? What would that look like to know if I am a good coach? For now, I'm going to cover what I consider probably the 4 most important success template criteria for being a good coach. Number 1, active listening, and more importantly, listening to understand as opposed to reply. A coach isn't making statements. A coach is listening to understand to further get clarity on the situation, how we got here today. What are those barriers and fears? Number 2, thought-provoking questioning. And we're talking about open-ended questions. We're talking about layered questions. And we're talking about questions that provoke thought, right? So if I'm sitting there and I look at Mike and I go, hey, Mike, talk to me. Like, why do you think it's always been a struggle for you to take good notes? And Mike says, geez, Mark, I don't know. Like, I haven't really given it a lot of thought. Well, now at that moment as his coach, I could say, well, I think it's probably blank. But that's not coaching, right? I need to ask Mike some more thought-provoking questions. So maybe a bell goes off in his head. He says, Mark, you know what, son of a gun? I think it's blank. Okay. So that's number 2. Number 3 is guidance, not advice, guidance, guiding someone to the promised land. Mike, have you ever met anybody in your life that the only way they were going to change is if it was their idea or their plan?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I can think of probably 5, 10 people that won't change unless it's their idea.
So what do you think that's about? Like, why does it have to be their idea? Like, let's root cause this from a tough question for you here. Like, what do you think that's about? Why does it have to be their idea as opposed to my agenda or my idea? What's that about?
I think a lot of that stems from a sense of pride and an overinflated ego at that point. And maybe it's just a thought that was ingrained in them from a very young age. Coming from a certain background, maybe they had never really been prideful of their work before. And so now that they're doing something, they might be super protective over their current functions.
Perfectly said. Now, Mike, let me ask you a question. On a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being you absolutely love being told what to do, and 1 being you hate it, where do you think it falls?
For me personally?
Yeah.
I'd say somewhere in a 7 to 8 range, honestly.
Okay. So,
I don't hate it.
Okay.
I don't love it.
So 7 to 8, but trends towards not minding it. So why do you not mind being told what to do?
I think that having that structure is good for me. And I don't necessarily have the best tools at my disposal to implement structure on my own. So I think that being instructed is good for me. And while I'm developing those tools to eventually develop my own structure, I'm not there yet. So I'm all right being told and instructed on how to do things and what to do.
I mean, how do you not love this kid? I mean, think about it for a second. So one of our cultural norms at MindsetGo is seeing feedback as a gift. Well, that's what he just essentially said, that he enjoys the structure, he enjoys being told what to do. Now, with that said, Mike, in all fairness, would you agree that most people don't love being told what to do?
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay. So when we talk about why people, it has to be their own idea, is because when we have as authority figures, when we have agendas as leaders, as parents, as coaches in sports, as an example, no one loves to be told, not nobody. Many people don't love to be told what to do. And so there's a defense mechanism that kicks in. And that's why I said coaching is not solving a problem or giving advice. Because if you can ask thought-provoking questions and listen to understand and not reply, and then, I mean, I can tell you I've experienced this so many times in my career. There is no better joy for me when I coach people when the person goes, I didn't even think of that. Wow. Yeah, you know what? In all the years that I've been trying to figure out why I'm getting emotional and reactive, that didn't even occur to me. Like, so what am I doing? I'm increasing someone's self-awareness. I'm reducing their blind spots. They realized it, not me. They realized it. And that's what great coaches do. They help people realize, connect the dots. Look, I'm going to share something personal with our audience, as I always have in iCommunicate. Okay. So when I was a kid, and let's be clear, right? When we're growing up, for those of us who are fortunate to have 2 healthy parents while we're growing up, one of the things we do as a kid, especially as we get older, we look at our parents and we say things like, when I have kids, I would definitely do that. Or when I have kids, I would not do that, right? Like we make these connections, Mike, right? And so our parents teach us things good and bad. Now, I had 2 good parents. I'm very grateful for the opportunities my parents provided. So I want to preface my comment by saying that, okay? But one of the things, and I've talked to my mother about this, one of the things my brothers and I have always agreed on growing up is my mother was always big on gratitude. Now, gratitude's a great thing. The problem is when she did nice things for us, she had to remind us frequently. And it just felt like a lot. Now, here's how coaching works, right? So because I had that template and that experience growing up, how that manifested in my day-to-day life is I didn't like having people do things for me because I felt like when people do things for me, I was going to owe them something. And so I didn't want to owe people things. So the connection I made, and this is what coaches do, that if you can connect the dots, so let's say Mike wanted to do me a favor. I'm like, no, Mike, I'm good. And then I was self-aware and noticed a pattern of why I wasn't accepting Mike's kindness. And then all of a sudden I said, wait a second. Mike's not expecting anything in return. That's not who he is. But I'm projecting my experiences with my mother on Mike, right? And that's what, some of you may be rolling your eyes at them. Well, that sounds like therapy. So what? Right? What if it does? Okay. So the reality here in this situation is that I actually talked to my mother. We had a great conversation about this a couple of years ago. And when I shared this with my mother, I said, Mom, I'm going to share something with you. And when I share this with you, my intention isn't to make you feel bad. So please, I appreciate everything you did for me. This isn't about making you feel bad or guilty. And one of the most powerful coaching strategies that I teach other people is setting the tone in a conversation by stating your intentions, right? My intentions aren't for you to feel bad, defensive, or guilty. It's to just have a dialogue. Just want to share with you some observations I've had. So we had a great conversation. And so the moral to this story, everybody, is that when I can make the connection of why I think a certain way or why I act a certain way, that is often the initial barrier that is preventing me from progressing. And that's why a great coach is guiding rather than giving direct advice. And to pull this whole thing home, so just in summary, the success template for coaching: active listening, listening to understand and not reply; thought-provoking, open-ended, layered questioning; guiding and not giving advice; and fourth, reflection and reframing. So when Mike said on a 1 to 10, he said 7 or 8, and that's because I need the structure, I relish the structure, I want that. What reflecting back would be like, so Mike, what I'm hearing is, that's what reflecting back means. One of the things we're trying to coach Mike at MindsetGo is when we give him projects or when he's getting tasks or clear, we are teaching him to go, okay, Mark, so just to be clear, you're saying that what you want is. And reflective listening is so damn powerful because it is the ultimate win-win, right? Because when you reflect back what you hear, either the person feels heard and understood, or they say, no, that's not what I meant, and they have a chance to correct it. So that's what a coaching success template looks like. Now, Mike, I want to ask you a question before we go any further in the podcast. Mike is a pickleball coach.
Yes, I
correct?
am.
Correct?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I have not had the luxury yet of getting coaching from Mike in pickleball, though I can't wait. I'm super excited for it. But Mike, we just talked about a success template for coaching. When you hear those 4 things, which of those do you think you actually apply when you're actually coaching pickleball?
So it's funny that you bring this up because it was a discussion today that I actually had. And honestly, I don't think I've been coaching. I think I've been training.
Wow.
And only today did that really sink in and make me start to reflect on my coaching practices and how I can change them to hopefully get better results.
Yeah, that's great awareness again on your part. And Mike and I were talking last week about a scenario where someone was helping me in pickleball, and the advice they gave me was to make sure I hold my racket out in front of me. And I said to Mike, I said, is that coaching? And he was thinking about it. I go, it's not. It's problem solving. It's advice. It's not coaching. Now, here's what it would look like so everybody has a framework to know exactly what I'm talking about here, because I really want you to end this podcast today and go, okay, no, I actually really understand what coaching is now. So what would have been different is that the person who was helping me said, hey, Mark, let me ask you a question. Where do you typically position your racket when you're getting ready for a ball being returned? To which I would say, I don't know. I don't even think I actually think about it. I think I just drop it down by my side. Oh, so where do you think the most effective place would be to position your racket? And then I'm like, geez, I don't know. I guess maybe out in front of me. I guess you're right. That would be the great place. Now, here is the end. And I want everybody to listen to this very carefully. Now, at that moment, when I'm right in my answer, this is where the coach really earns his or her money. So now the coach says, okay, well, it sounds like you're bought in that would be the place to hold it. How do we develop that habit, Mark? How are we going to put a plan into place so you develop that habit? Ladies and gentlemen, that's coaching. Telling me where to put it is not coaching. And so Mike and I had a great conversation about that. And, Mike, I'm curious, and please, when I ask you this question, please speak your truth, because I don't want you to say something because I'm your boss and you have to say it a certain way. What experiences have you had that just by simply working here in a company about communication and stuff like that, like, is there anything at this point you've been like, oh my God, like before I started Mindset Go, and you kind of just alluded to one, but is there anything else that you said, yeah, now I think about blank all the time because of what we talk about in our culture? Is there anything you can think of?
Well, yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I think about what coaching actually entails a lot more. And I'm also starting to think about how to implement some of our daily practices to help me be a better me, not even just in work, but outside of work as well. There's a lot of things that I'm picking up as far as keeping myself organized and things like that just weren't clicking before, but have started to click now.
And anything specific that you could, like a norm or a behavior or habit that you think about more than you did in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So, but there was one that you actually addressed, reflecting. And reflecting those tasks back to whether it be you or someone else, and then getting that feedback immediately to know, am I understanding this task correctly? Is this what you want? Is what I'm thinking what you're thinking? Because I'm not a mind reader, and I know how much we would love to all be mind readers, but unfortunately, I just don't fall in that category. So I do really love having that kind of ingrained in me now at this point, where at the end of calls, at the end of discussions, I will reflect back exactly what the deliverables, action items, anything is that I need to be working on, so I know I'm getting the right task done.
Beautiful. Now, one last thing before we shift gears here. I want to read you the difference between, in terms of talking, what coaching would look like, what consulting would look like, and what mentoring would look like. A mentor would say, here's what's worked for me in the past. A consultant would say, here's what I think you should do. A coach would say, what do you think needs to happen? That's the distinction. And notice that the first two are advice and recommendation based, and the last one is a collaborative, empowering way to pull something out of people. Now, here's the thing about coaching, right? If I had a nickel for every time I got a call from a company over the course of my career that said, Mark, boy, we need Mindset Go to help us. Our managers aren't holding people accountable. We're not setting clear expectations. So could you come in and help us? And you know what goes through my mind when I get a call like that? And my intention isn't to be snarky, but what goes through my mind is, how did they get that way? Right? So your managers aren't holding people accountable. So shall I assume that you're not holding your managers accountable? Because if they're not holding people accountable, how long has that been going on? And if it's been going on a while, then I guess it's okay, right? Because they haven't been held accountable for not holding people accountable. Now, that's a harsh view, and I think there's an element of truth to it. And the reality of the situation is that one of the reasons people reach out to us is because it goes back to what we talked about earlier in the show about barriers. Why those executives are often not holding managers accountable is because they don't have the skill. They don't know how to coach. They don't know how to do it, which is what I said in the beginning of the show, because they're too busy problem solving and giving people advice. That what it looks like, Mike, in these conversations is, if I'm your boss and in these situations, right, I'm going, hey, Mike, you need to have a conversation with this person. We can't let that go on. As if that's new information for Mike. Like, was Mike sitting there going, oh, I didn't even realize that was an option. Really? I could have a conversation with them? Damn, that's insightful. So again, if the way we're coaching Mike, allegedly coaching, is by telling him what he's doing wrong, what he needs to do differently, and how to do it, there's no buy-in there, right? There's no buy-in there. So why does it matter? right? At the end of the day, why does it matter? So how do companies suffer? At MindsetGo, our core business is something called the cultural evolution model. We focus on organizational leadership development, right? So I often get on calls. Matter of fact, I was on a call with, and this is one of my favorite stories this year. I was on a call with a CEO and 3 other leaders in a 4-person leadership team. This was a sales call. And so one of the leaders put this whole thing in motion because she thought the culture was a real problem. She said, I want you to meet our team and the CEO and so on and so forth. So we get on the call, we're talking about it. CEO is asking me a few questions. And 15 minutes into the call, the guy looks at me and says, it's a Zoom call. He looks at me and says, yeah, Mark, I hear what you're saying. And the reality of the situation is we have too many strategic growth initiatives. We don't have time for culture. So, maybe reach out to us in about 3 months, as if anything would be different with that mindset in 3 months. So I said, okay. And I'm not going to use the guy's name. I said to the guy, I said, can I ask a couple of questions? He said, sure. So I looked at the 3 leaders on the call and I said, on a 1 to 10 scale, and here my question was very intentional. On a 1 to 10 scale, how much is the poor culture impacting bottom line and strategic growth initiatives? And the craziest thing happened. Coincidentally, all 3 of them said 4. It's the weirdest thing. They all said 4. How does that happen even? So anyway, they all said 4. So I looked back at the CEO and I said, hearing that from your leadership team, I'm curious, does that change your opinion at all? And I'm not exaggerating. He looked at me and goes, I hear you. I hear you. And I would recommend talking to me again in 3-4 months. Why did I tell that story? I told the story because in the workplace, there's the difference between intellectual and actually processing the need for something. Who would argue that coaching isn't important? Like, there's nothing to argue. It's like when I tell people we help people become more confident and effective communicators. Like, what are they going to say? Well, that's terrible. We don't need that. Like, right? It's obviously important. There's nothing insightful about that. So the reality is, why do we need it? How does it impact the bottom line? Right? And I can tell you, first and foremost, it's about catalyzing change, right? Because people struggle with change. There's so many things. The reason why we call it the cultural evolution model is because we're always evolving our culture. Companies are always, the people are evolving, the growth is evolving, there's always change. How do you coach change? If I look at Mike Kamali and we're making hey Mike, guess what? We're gonna make a policy change. Okay? You have to come to work in person every single day moving forward. Okay. So what if Mike doesn't like that? What if Mike isn't on board with that? What if that was a different expectation than when I laid out when he took the job? Well, he's going to struggle with change. People struggle to adapt to change. People struggle to embrace change because they like the status quo. People like to be comfortable. Coaching is helping people embrace the uncomfortable. We do a lot of work with companies on generational communication. And what I always find funny about generational communication is the stereotype and stigma around older generations like my own is we don't embrace technology. We struggle with technology. There's an element of truth to that. There's no question. It's not permanent. It's not across the board, but there's an element. Mike, agree? There's an element of truth to that?
I would agree to an extent. I think that you've actually embraced it very well.
Oh my God. I feel so awesome now.
I'm not pampering you up, but I mean, like it's a serious statement. I mean, you encourage us to use AI in a lot of our work, and I think that really shows a lot of acceptance about technology. And nowadays, I know that it's been harder for other people to accept.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I try to model certain behaviors, and so the point I'm making is, if you work at a company where you have employees that have been there a long time, maybe leaders, maybe team members, where you're rolling out a new technology and they're being resistant and difficult. Why do you think they're being resistant and difficult? Do you think those employees are being resistant and difficult to get under your skin? Are they maliciously plotting against you? Are they saying, I know what I'll do. I'll frustrate Mark because I'll be difficult and resistant around technology. They're not doing that. We're back to fears and barriers, right? They're doing it because they're afraid of being obsolete. They're afraid they may get replaced and lose their job. They're afraid their usefulness and ability to make an impact to the company will drop. Isn't that fair? Isn't that fair? So if you are a leader and you have to coach that person, doesn't it make a difference if you go into that dialogue curious and not judgmental? Because if you go in going, oh, there's Mark again, he's just won't go along with this. It has to be difficult. Or, geez, let me put my coaching techniques into practice. Let me ask thought-provoking questions. Let me get to the fears and barriers in the way. I wonder why they're being so resistant as opposed to they're just so resistant. It's a mindset. It's an attitude, right? We call our company MindsetGo. It wasn't an accident. I believe in my heart, and I will go to my grave saying this, that your attitude and your mindset is the biggest predictor of personal and professional success and happiness. And if you're in the workplace, if you don't want to be a leader, then stop being a leader. When you're a parent, you're supposed to, in a perfect world, and we all have bad days, but when you're a parent, your job is to model. Your job is to inspire. Your job is to support. We don't have a playbook for our kids that say, oh, treat all my kids the exact same, coach them the exact same way. Of course we don't. We adapt, right, based on the audience and personality traits and strengths and weaknesses and so on and so forth. So coaching is what you signed up for in leadership. And if you tell me you don't have time to coach, geez, I thought that was part of the job, right? So when we talk about why it matters, you're talking about employee engagement, you're talking about culture. One thing, I'm a really flawed human being. I think we're all flawed for that matter, but I know I'm really flawed, okay? And I can tell you, if I was to hook up all my employees to a lie detector test and said, what don't you like about me? I'm sure they could come up with some things, okay? And that's fine. I can live with that. The thing is, what I want them to know is they are a critical and valuable contributor to the company. Everything we do, they impact our success, our bottom line, culture, employee engagement, all those things. And one of the ways I create that culture is I coach people and I spend time with people and I try to pull things out of people. So if you're wondering at a company like the CEO example, we said, well, we got to focus on strategic growth initiatives. I would say to you, if your executive team or your leadership team doesn't know how to coach, you tell me. You tell me what the consequences are. Because if people aren't setting clear expectations, if people aren't being held accountable, if you're not developing a bench at your company, and we won't even get into what develop means yet, right? Then you tell me what the ramifications are. Do you have a productive team? Do you have a collaborative team? Do you have teams that work in silos that get along, or are they redundant and do things on their own? You tell me. So, for our final segment today, okay, and we will continue our next podcast. We're going to continue this discussion where we left off. And for our final segment today, I want to talk about red flags in avoidance. And where I want to go is we create narratives, these myths that we tell ourselves. Courageous conversations. I can't talk to them. How come? Oh, it's just going to be an argument. Okay. Has that been your experience with that person, that you've had arguments with them in the past? No. So what tells you it's going to be an argument? Well, it just seems like every time I have conversations like this, it's an argument. Oh, okay. So you see, remember the example I gave with my mother and how my behavior manifests? You see how people are creating this narrative that every conversation is going to result in an argument because maybe they've had conversations that were arguments? This is what I mean about the myths, right? So one of the things about coaching is, listen, Mark, do you know how much I have on my plate? Like, you think I have time to sit there and pull things out of people and actively listen and ask questions? Hey, Mike, this is how you do it. Go do it. I don't have time. I got to go to my next meeting and go to my next problem and my next task and my next project because I don't have time to actually coach people. And the absolute fallacy in that is the risk reward analysis, because the short-term time investment that you would make will pay long-term dividends because you're teaching people how to solve their own problems, right? So that's really what it comes down to, is can you get on board with the concept short-term will generate long-term results? And the fact of the matter is, right, when I hear the executives and leaders that we work with tell me they have a time management problem, Mike, the very first question I ask someone who's in a leadership role who says that is, let's start with, who are you enabling? Well, what do you mean by that? They say. Well, I mean, how many people are coming to you for the same problem and same situations over and over again because they know you'll do the work for them? You know, they'll know that you'll problem solve. Well, that's the myth, right? That if I take the time, I won't have time for other things. So that's the narrative and the myth that's created. Well, what happens if I start coaching someone and they don't know how to answer the questions? Like, what happens if I say, hey, Mike, what do you think the biggest challenges with note-taking are? Mike's like, I don't know. Haven't even thought about it, he says. So now what? Is the conversation over because we're stuck? I'm going to ask thought-provoking questions to maybe guide him to what those answers are. So you got the time pressure. You've got lack of psychological safety. Listen, I didn't get into that in the success template for coaching, right? I could be the single greatest coach in the world, which you're going to find is a contradiction in what I'm about to say. I could ask the most brilliant questions in the world. I could be the greatest listener. But if Mike doesn't feel psychological safety in speaking his truth to me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? Because to get people to open up and realize their blind spots, right, they have to feel safe to do so. I have said time and time again that the ultimate coaching success template, if you, and I get asked this question, Mike, I probably get asked this question 24 times a year. How do you know if someone is coachable? This is the question I get asked a couple dozen times. I can tell you. There's 3 boxes to check. Are they aware of what they need to do differently? Not because you've told them, because they're self-aware of what they need to do differently. Number 2, are they accountable, saying, this has to change. I need to do this differently. And number 3, are they motivated to actually do it differently? That's the big 3. That is the Garnett, Pearson, Ray Allen. So I'm going to say right now that anybody who's listening to this podcast, if you have people at your company in leadership or executive positions, and you're like, I'm just not sure it's coachable, ask yourself those 3 questions. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Mark, I'm just curious. Can you put motivation behind them? Can you incite the motivation either through, promise of reward or things like that? Or is that going to be a negative and take away from the actual effect of the coaching?
Well, it's a really good question, Mike. And one of my single favorite coaching questions to ask to address your question is, what would motivate you to do what I'm asking you to do? And I'm going to tell you, when I brought that up, all the years I've been coaching, I have a lot of leaders roll their eyes at me when I say that. And I know why they're rolling their eyes, because they've told me. They're rolling their eyes because they're like, Mark, I just want to make sure I understand the coaching you're giving us here. You're saying that when we have employees that aren't doing the fundamental parts of their job, not going above and beyond, doing their job, what they were hired for, what they're hired to do, you want me to ask them what would motivate you to do what you're already supposed to be doing? So when I get that kind of response, I say, well, before I even try to suggest why I think that would be the best approach, could I ask you, how's your approach working? Do you find you're having success with your approach? So when I say, what would motivate you. I'm trying to get clarity. I'm trying to get inside their head and understand what would actually motivate you. And Mike, this is one of my favorite anecdotes of all time. So then there's always a few people in the room and go, well, you know what we're going to hear? More money. And you know what I say? I say, if that was the answer someone gave me, I'd be ecstatic. And here's why. Because you've surfaced something, which is what coaching is all about, surfacing frustrations, fears, issues. So this is how I would handle that. More money. So I would look at them and go, and before I say how I would handle this, Mike, think about how triggered leaders are in that spot. What would motivate you to do what you're already supposed to do? And the person says more money, now you're pissed. Now the leader's like, in their head, they're going, are you for real? Okay. So this is what I would say to the person. And I mean verbatim, this is what I would say to the person. I would say, so, thank you for telling me that. And in my experience, when people tell me they want more money to do the fundamental aspects of their job, what it usually tells me is they don't feel recognized, valued, and appreciated for the work they're doing. So I wanted to slow down and ask you, do you feel recognized, valued, and appreciated? Because money is a facade in many cases. And that's just a read between the lines saying, why would I do these things in my job? You don't even appreciate me for what I already do. And every time I walk people through and coach on that, Mike, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. But you're too busy getting triggered by the response. More money to do what I'm already supposed to be doing. So some of the listeners, when they hear me tell that story, go, well, Mark, I'm confused because I thought you said coaching wasn't giving recommendations and advice. And it sounds like what you just did is you showed people what you would do in that situation. Well, let's not get confused here. I'm modeling something. I'm walking people through a scenario. That's so people can get context and an understanding of how to reframe their mindset and not get triggered and get curious to know, well, wait a minute, I just learned new information. So that's why that's one of my favorite stories. So look, the last thing for today is this. We talked about why people avoid coaching. Again, confidence, skills, myths, narratives, there's a bunch of things. And the thing I want to end with today is, what are the red flags that tell you someone needs coaching? Well, I already just told you the success template for knowing if they're coachable, so you know that. This is what I think about, okay? Repetitive trends and patterns of behavior. Even 2 times. If I see something 2 times, and think about this, everybody, it's not just the amount of times, it's the range of the frequency within like a month or a week or whatever, there's that. But it's also, is there a change in pattern behavior? Mike could be the greatest employee we've ever had at MindsetGo. He's never been late for work. And then all of a sudden he starts showing up late for work. Okay, well, there's a change in pattern. There's a change in behavior. That's a dead giveaway red flag for coaching. Self-doubt or negative self-talk. If you hear someone, you're working with someone on your team, and they're like, I'm just not good at that. I'll never be good at that. Okay, coaching opportunity, right? Communication issues, resistance to change, chronic busyness, confusing busy with productivity, lack of clarity or direction, misalignment of expectations. These are all red flags in coaching. And in summary, everybody, look, so happy to be back doing iCommunicate. And in summary today, we've walked through on this show the success template to know if someone's coachable. We've walked through the success template criteria to know if you're being a good coach and are you doing the right things. We've walked through barriers and fears and how to approach coaching first and foremost and think about what some of those barriers and fears are. We've talked about the importance of going into a conversation with curiosity as opposed to judgment. So, Mike, I got to tell you, it's been so great working with you on this. And For our listeners, if you want more information about contacting Mindset Go, that we can support your company on culture or leadership or communication of any kind, please reach out to info@mindsetgo.com. And otherwise, thank you for listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.